Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This time I wanted to talk about a classic, namely Foundation Trilogy by Isaac Asimov. This was one of the first sci-fi novels I read. It's one of those science fiction novels that turns out on like every must-read list. It's been hugely influential over time. This was released in the 1950s and it inspired all kinds of stories. So in this video I want to talk about what the story is about, what stood out to me, what I think worked really well, and some things which didn't really work. And so if you're wondering to pick it up yourself or just want to know what it's about, you should watch this video. So what's it about? The basic idea is that there's this huge galactic empire. It takes place far into the future and humanity has expanded far outside of Earth. They've expanded onto a lot of different planets, like thousands of them. And there is this man named Harry Seldon, who is a mathematician, and he figures out a way to predict the future using maths and other statistics, and he calls it psychohistory. Well, he basically combines statistics and maths and psychology. He mixes them together and he uses it to prevent the future. And in this way he predicts the end of the galactic empire, and he realizes that the galaxy is headed towards a 30,000 years of a dark age, with wars and chaos and the whole empire falling apart. So he creates a plan to basically reduce the amount of time this dark age takes place, and he manages to reduce it to 1,000 years. And so this plan involves creating a foundation, which is a planet-wide like library on the edge of the galaxy. And he gathers all the scientists and other people to preserve all human knowledge and to basically rebuild civilization. And so this trilogy follows this foundation as it tries to survive, as the human galactic empire actually starts crumbling down. All planets basically become independent of each other, and well, the foundation basically has to survive within all this, through all kinds of challenges and wars and political threats and other uncertainties. And so the first book is called Foundation. It was released in 1951 and it's basically a collection of short novels, of short stories I should say, and they take each place decades after each other. And so instead of following one main character, you're following the progress of the foundation over time. What I really enjoyed about this book is that most of the action isn't really action, as the people on the foundation are basically only scientists. They aren't really capable of waging war, and so they don't solve their problems with weapons, but they solve them through ideas and negotiation and science, and sometimes even clever manipulation. And so it's kind of like a chess match played over the course of generations. It did take me a little while to get used to this structure, because every time I started getting into a storyline, it would jump again like 30 or 50 years and focus on completely different characters. It threw me off a bit at first, but once I get used to it, I could definitely appreciate the bigger picture Asimov was trying to paint. And so the writing is very direct. There's not a lot of descriptions and not much emotional depth. It's not very character focused. The main character is basically the Foundation itself. But if you're into political strategy and world building, I think there's a lot to enjoy here. And then the second book, which is called Foundation and Empire, which focuses a lot more on the Foundation and the Empire itself, which is really crumbling down at this point. The second book is mainly split into two parts. The first part basically shows the Foundation dealing with what's left of this old human empire. Stakes are getting a lot higher. And so the Foundation manages to grow a lot stronger because they have to, but they're also gaining a lot more enemies because the human empire is falling apart, and so all these planets are becoming independent. Well, they have to deal with a lot of different enemies, and so these enemies kind of want to control the Foundation or just destroy it at all because they think it's pointless. And the second half introduces a new character called the Mule, and this is kind of where the story becomes something completely different. I don't want to give too much away, but the Mule basically completely disrupts everything. So he's kind of unpredictable, which matters a lot because the Foundation is really dependent on Harry Seldon's ability to look into the future. He predicted a lot of things that would happen, and so they've kind of been hinging on that. Even though he was already not alive anymore, he has predicted that for a lot of things that would happen. And with the Mule, a lot of things changes. He didn't predict him, and so his plans basically become useless. And so the Foundation completely goes off script, and well, they kind of have to figure things out on itself. So that adds a lot of suspense. And so this book also brings a lot more of emotional tension. In my opinion, there's a lot more heart. It also takes place on a much smaller scale, time-wise. So you spend a lot more time with the same characters. And so there's a lot more fear, a lot more uncertainty, and much more questions about if Harry Seldon's plan does even matter at this point. And then there's the third book, which is called The Second Foundation, which isn't really a spoiler, but Harry Seldon basically had created two foundations in case the first one didn't work out, which it didn't, and so they start looking for this one and the first foundation, and they basically don't know much about it. This part of the trilogy dives much more into questions about control and secrecy and free will. Questions if someone can guide society without people even knowing, is that even protection or is it manipulation? The story becomes much more psychological. There are mind games, hidden motives, and they basically try to search for the truth, which also gives this book again a very different flavor. And I think the ending is really well done. But what do I think overall? I think the ideas in Foundation are very big. The novels themselves aren't very long, they're like 3 of them, all like 250 pages, so you end up with like a 700-page story. But the ideas are very big. It's about the rise and fall of civilizations, about how history moves, and whether if it's even possible to predict and control the future. And so all of this is told through politics, economics, psychology, and not through space battles or laser guns. There's barely any action. It's mainly just people talking in rooms, but it's done in a good way. But not the easiest read. The characters can feel distant, underdeveloped. The writing is more focused on logic than emotion. But I found myself pulled in despite of that. Especially by the second and third book. I think Asimov's vision is very ambitious. He's not really telling a story about a person trying to save the galaxy, but more about how systems do shape history. What happens if people try to control something as big as human progress. You know, it's a story that makes you think, and I didn't always feel connected to the characters. I was always curious to see how things would unfold. So that's my take on the Foundation Trilogy by Isaac Asimov. I think it's a idea-driven sci-fi space opera. Asks big questions and doesn't always give easy answers. If you've read it, let me know what you thought of it. Or maybe you think about reading it, and you're always free to ask questions if you want to know more about it. Let me know in the comments. I always love to hear what people think about it. Anyway, thanks for watching, and until next time.